Hello, BookTube. It's Tuesday, and that means tags, and I have a bunch of tags that I want to do today. I have another one for you on the iPad here that I don't think I've ever done. It struck me as one of those tags. Sometimes you see one that you're sure you've already done, and I don't think I have. This is the last 10 books tag, which was created by Marc Nash. And I saw it most recently on Kit's World. I'll leave a link to both of those. Neither one of them, I don't think, maybe Marc Nash tagged me, but Kit's World did not. But one way or another, it's one of those thumbnail sort of check-in tags that I love because they give a kind of an overview to new readers, to new viewers, to newcomers to your channel, which is an important thing to keep in mind. That's the sort of the theme binding together all three tags that I want to do today. And the first question, these are great bookish prompts, just fantastic. You'd expect that from Marc Nash, so I'm hoping that a lot of you will do this if you haven't already. Number one is the last book you didn't finish. And I don't know. I'm starting off weak because I can't remember the last time I didn't finish a book. It's been a while, and it obviously made no strong impression on me. So let's just move on straight away to question number two. The last book that you reread, and this was, for me, a great big thing that I just recently mentioned on this channel, Command and Control by Eric Schlosser, about America's nuclear near misses, about the American nuclear program, and the many times that it has come a whisker away from catastrophe. I mentioned it on this channel, and I mentioned that I didn't have a copy, and one of you sent me a copy. One of you found a used hardcover for dirt cheap and just had it sent to me. So I reread it. I got it in the mail, and I reread it, and was horrified all over again. The horrifying thing about Command and Control is that any idea that you have, if you're an American, for instance, that the reason there's been no nuclear catastrophe on the size of Fukushima or Chernobyl is because the American safeguards are better. That idea goes right out the window when you read Command and Control. This country has come a random, totally random, accidental factor away from nuking itself, from starting thermonuclear war, a full-scale exchange, many, many times. It's just luck. That's all, and that's terrifying. Then the next prompt is the last book you bought. That just by as random chance, just the roulette wheel spin, would be The World of Christopher Marlowe, a biography of Christopher Marlowe that was the last of the things I got at the last trip that I made to, I think, a thrift shop, a charity shop of some kind or other. I mean, it would have been in a batch of books, but it was one of the last ones that I actually paid money for, a tiny amount of money, cents on the dollar. And I reread it, and I liked it. I liked it quite a bit. Then number four is the last book you said you read but didn't. And I don't have an answer for this one either, because I don't have any idea why I would say I read a book if I didn't. So I'm just gonna move on to the next prompt. Number five is the last book you wrote in the margins of, and the answer to that would be either The World of Christopher Marlowe or Command and Control, because I write in the margins of almost everything that I read. If I know that I'm going to keep the copy, if there's the slightest thought in my mind that I might give it away, then I try to restrain myself. But otherwise, usually, in addition to a bookmark, a thing that is keeping place in the book for me is one of those little mechanical pencils, because I write in the margins all the time. I annotate my books. Then prompt number six is the last book you had signed. I typically don't do this. I don't care about author signatures, and I usually begrudge the time necessary to go to a reading and then stand in line. I hate doing that sort of thing, and it always struck me as a weird kind of performative waste of time. I know that there are a lot of booktubers who did in pre-pandemic years do that sort of thing and love it. And an extra special treat for me was the handful of booktubers who actually chronicled that in videos. That really started to change my mind, that can be obviously just an expression of extreme reading enthusiasm. There's nothing wrong with that. I still don't think I would ever do it, except for the times when it was incumbent on me. I worked for a long time in a retail bookstore, a big retail bookstore chain here in the United States, that often not only hosted authors at the store, but also sent a couple of booksellers with a little V-cart full of boxes of books to off-site book events, where the author's giving a talk and wants to mention at the podium that the people from Barnes & Noble, the bookstore, are in the back of the room selling my book. After a while, it became obvious to even the dumbest managers that I was working with that I was kind of a good person to send along to do that. Not because I could handle the cash well. I always needed a keeper. I always needed a minder. There was one guy in particular who we made a great team, fantastic team. But not for that, but because I could talk to the author, I could talk to the publicist, I could talk to the readers who were there, who might want to do that, and might expect, maybe readers old enough to expect that the booksellers at the table might know something about books, whereas that is not, don't go to an event expecting that. And when it came to circumstances like that, where I had to go, well, then I would often, I would often buy a copy of the book myself and ask the author to sign it. And the last time that I did that was a book called To Catch a King, a history of King Charles II coming back to the throne, the Restoration, and systematically and coldly hunting down all the men who authorized the killing of his father, King Charles I. And it was the subject of a book, not the Tyrannicide Brief, which is a great book on the same subject. It was this was a later book, and its author was the Earl of Spencer, Princess Diana's brother, who wrote this book. He did a fantastic job. He gave a great reading at the Boston Athenaeum, I believe it was, and then stuck around to sign books, and we ended up socializing. We ended up having a great long rambling conversation that moved venues, and it was a lot of fun. And I would have missed that if I had just operated on a blanket disdain of author signings and author signed copies. I would have missed all that. So I'm glad that I a little bit dispense with that disdain. I don't think I would ever go to such an event if I weren't selling the books in the back of the room, but even so, meeting Lord Spencer was a lot of fun. So that was the last one. Then number 7 is The Last Book You Lost, and I just noticed this. It was just the other day on the library tour of Dune. I held up a larger size Marvel Treasury edition. Marvel 50 years ago did larger size paperback Treasury editions for reprinting some comics. And I held up the Treasury edition of the Mighty Thor. But I mentioned in that video that they had also done, that Mighty Thor's Treasury edition was number 3, and that number 2 was the Fantastic Four, which I have, and that number 1 was Spider-Man, which I also have. And then I checked the shelf and realized I have number 2, but I don't have Marvel Treasury edition number 1, the Spider-Man edition, anymore. I don't have it anymore. And I'm afraid to look online at Amazon or eBay to see how much money it would be to get. So I would love to have a copy of that, but I'm almost afraid to see how much it would cost, considering that it was $1.50 when I paid for it. Maybe I have it and it's just somewhere else, but I don't think so. I think I would have kept it with the others. So I'm calling it lost. Then number 8 was The Last Book You Had to Replace. And this was a long time ago. It was the latest Tom Clancy novel. It might have been the one after The Cardinal and the Kremlin. Not quite sure what the title of it was. A big honking thing. And I hadn't read it, and I hadn't read it, and I hadn't read it. And then I started to feel like, well, okay, he's a major author in your time. You really should read it. So I borrowed a copy from the library. I borrowed a copy from the Boston Public Library. And it was destroyed by a group of unruly beagles. Once upon a time, I was absolutely defined in the minds of everyone who knew me by books and beagles. And it was just assumed if a friend fell out of contact for a while and got back in touch with me, they would say, okay, what are the books that you're getting? Are you reviewing? Are you writing? Are you selling at a bookstore? And also, how many beagles do you have? It was just a standard thing forever and ever and ever. But it's been a long time now that I haven't had a beagle in my life. Amazing to me. But nevertheless true. And I did at the time have a huge crowd of beagles. And there was a point I was reading on the bed and Tom Clancy put me to sleep, as he often did. Not literally to sleep, but where I just sort of lost interest in the book. And crucially, it slipped off the bed, slid down the covers, and hit the floor with a thunk. It was a big book. And that was all that my beagles needed. That was all that my boys needed, was that. and they were on it in 2 seconds. Then they gleefully tore it apart. And I was telling them the whole time, boys, that's a library book. Don't do that. It's a library book. But they didn't care. They pretended until their dying day that they didn't understand English. So I had to replace that book, whatever it was. I had to get a copy from the Boston Public Library. Always annoying. I think that might have been the last time that I had to replace a library book. And my dog now, Frida, would not attack a book under any circumstances. I know she made her initial appearance on this channel chewing on a book. I didn't even introduce her. I didn't even know her name. I think that was the day after I got her that I made that video, where she's chewing on a book, but she immediately stopped doing that and has no interest in it now. My books are completely safe from her. They're completely safe from her chewing on them, and they're completely safe from any kind of hair. She doesn't shed, so there's no dog hair all over the place here anymore. Then number 9 is the last book you had an argument over, and this is a book that I have mentioned on this channel is an argument starter, and it's The Delivery by Peter Mendelsohn. Peter Mendelssohn's new book, which I think is out now in stores, and which is tremendously effective and involving. It's gripping, and then it has an ending, and the ending is, I don't even know the words to describe it. I can't talk about it on this channel until I'm sure that it's either old news or that most of you have already read it, and I don't recommend that you read it, so I don't know how long that will be. Maybe we'll talk about it next year. But a lot of critics that I know have read it, and one of them disagreed with me. We had a long, detailed argument about how the ending of the book profanes the whole experience. It's a genuine, for me, a genuine example of a what on earth were you thinking type ending. And there was one critic friend of mine that didn't see it that way, and I hauled out all sorts of highfalutin metatextual criticism, literary criticism type things. Formal literary criticism, in my experience, is typically used to lie about a book. and this was a perfect case of that. I won the argument, in my opinion. And then prompt number 10 is the last book you couldn't get a hold of. And for me, it was The Quest for Queen Mary, edited by Hugo Vickers, about Pope Hennessy's official authorized biography of Queen Mary. And I couldn't get a hold of it for a typical reason for me. My remit, what I consider to be my beat, is new releases in the American book market in that current year. And The Quest for Queen Mary, I don't think is ever going to be published in America. Why would it be? But it was published in the UK. So I saw some UK channels talking about it, and I didn't have access to it. I'm not saying I couldn't get a hold of it. I could probably have had somebody at the UK branch of the publishing house get me a copy, but I wasn't sure that I would review it. And I try not to review books that don't have an American release. I can't review everything. So I didn't feel right even requesting it, so I didn't. And one of you sent it to me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have read it since. I loved it, but I wouldn't have read it since. So, and then all that's left to do is tag people. And I want to tag, let's see, Drawn to Stories. I want to tag Brian at Bookish if he hasn't already done it. Hannah's Books. TomLABooks. Rachel Mauro. Haven't tagged Rachel Mauro nearly enough. And also 2 new channels, the BookWorm and Abbie Bauer. And I will leave a link to all of those things down below. And that is the last 10 books tag. And the nice thing about this tag is that you could do it every month. If you wanted to, I could do it every month. So I'll make a point of doing this later on in the year as well. But this is one of the many tags that I want to do today. So I'm going to wrap this up and try to do another one. Thank you, BookTube.